The market shocked us all last week, having its best week since April. And the news media was reporting that the market was doing so well because there was going to be a separation of power. The Democrats were going to win the presidency and the Republicans were going to keep the Senate. But we don't think that's the case. In this week's video, we're going to cover everything that you need to know about the election and also give you our opinion as to why the market is performing how it is.
The market screamed higher last week and erased all of the losses from the previous week. All the US indexes were up over 6% last week, and the NASDAQ led the way up over 9%, and now the NASDAQ's up over 30% again for the year. After a strong week out of the S&P 500, up over 7%, it's now up over 8% year to date. The Dow Jones and the Russell 2000 continue to lag, but they're getting closer to break even. Now, there were two major news stories that got overshadowed by the election last week. First, the Federal Reserve came out and said that they were going to keep interest rates around 0% for an extended period of time. And also, the jobs numbers came out for October as the US added about 638,000 jobs in the month of October, showing signs of continued improvement out of the economy. Foreign and emerging markets both had very strong weeks as well, with both of those indexes up over 7%. Now, foreign markets are still down about 5% for the year, but emerging markets after last week up 7% year to date. Now, if President Trump's lawsuits fail and Biden does take office in January, foreign and emerging markets are two spots to keep an eye on, because one of the things that Biden already said, the first things he's going to do when he takes office, is reopen a lot of those conversations and relationships overseas that President Trump had shut down during his 4 years in office. Also, I wanted to quickly note that as we're shooting this video on Monday morning, the markets are continuing their rally from last week, up about 3% at the open, after one of the major pharmaceutical companies came out and said that their vaccine has approximately a 90+% success rate. So a lot of the sectors of the market that got beat up pretty bad during the pandemic are now starting to perform a little bit better this morning, as investors are now thinking that the economy might get back to normal sooner than later. Now, Matt's going to talk more about the election and how it's not quite over yet, and also, in our opinion, two of the best case scenarios that we see for the market moving forward.
So let's talk about what's really going on with the election. Over the weekend, the mainstream news media announced that Joe Biden would be our 46th president, but that's just not the case, not yet. He is being projected as the winner, but the key date that you need to remember is December 14th. That's when state legislators go in and allocate their electoral college votes. If you go back to the 2000 election, Al Gore was projected the president until he conceded on December the 13th. It's also very important to note that there are 10 voter fraud lawsuits going on in 10 different states. We have a recount going on in Wisconsin and also Georgia. And President Trump scored a big win in Pennsylvania as Judge Alito forced Pennsylvania to separate their votes that came in after November the 3rd. So this election isn't over just yet. As remember, December 14th is the key date that we're going to be focused on, unless the Supreme Court pushes that date back. So now I wanted to give you our thoughts on why the market is performing so well over the past week. And we don't think it's because we're going to have a split power. We actually think it's because we're going to either have all blue House, Senate, and President, or all red Republican House, Republican Senate, and Republican President. And here's why. So let's talk about scenario number one. That is, there's all blue House, Senate, and President. So in this scenario, President Trump's lawsuits will essentially have to be thrown out. The Republicans are 2 seats short right now in the House with 9 races yet to be called. In the Senate, there are 2 runoffs happening in Georgia. And if both of those do go to the Democrats will be at a 50-50 tie, with the Democrats having the +1 advantage in the Senate. Now, how does that happen in the Senate? As those 2 seats were originally won pretty handily by the Republicans. Well, they didn't win by a big enough margin and reach 50%, so now there's a revote going to happen. And if President Trump loses his lawsuits and his base does not show up to vote for the 2 Republican senators, which there's a good chance that will not happen, then we will see a Democrat Senate, and then obviously a Democrat president in that scenario. So let's talk about the other scenario, how all 3 can go red. Well, if President Trump wins some of his voter fraud lawsuits, then we could be looking at enough seats in the House to flip to Republicans. The Senate would be controlled, as we probably see a seat flip in Michigan, and then also both Georgia Senate seats would go Republican and President Trump would remain in control. So now you may be wondering why both of those scenarios are good for the market. And essentially, it's just because the money will continue to flow into the market. If it's all blue or all red, legislation will be able to be passed through and money will constantly flow into the market, which is what we saw with the Federal Reserve dumping so much money in earlier this year. Thanks for watching, and I have a funny feeling we're in for a couple crazy weeks ahead as everything gets sorted out with the election. As always, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook. See you next week.